Turn off your cell phones or switch or turn them into silent mode. We are very pleased to host this morning Dr. Khalil Shikaki, old friend of ours, and thank you again for coming, sharing your findings and thoughts with us. You all received his CV, so I skipped some of it. Okay, with your permission. So, Khalil Shikaki is Professor of Political Science, Director of the Palestinian Center for Policy Survey Research, based in Ramallah. Since 2005, he has been Senior Fellow at the Crown Center of the Middle East Studies at Brandeis University. Got his PhD from Columbia University and taught in several Palestinian and American universities. And also Dean of Scientific Research at Al-Najah University in Nablus. And in the last 20 or 24 years, he has conducted more than 200 public opinion polls among the Palestinians, and was very generous in sharing the findings with us. So without further ado, Dr. Shikaki, please tell us the latest about what the Palestinians think.
Thank you very much. The survey, the most recent survey, is one of our regular surveys. It was conducted about 2-3 weeks, and it focused on the domestic environment as well as matters related to Israeli-Palestinian relations. It was conducted after the convention, the Fatah 7th convention or Congress, and it was conducted before the recent decision by the Security Council Resolution 2334. So let me begin by referring to that resolution.
Hold on 1 second, for technical reason, let these people come in.
There is no doubt that this resolution helps Abbas, the Palestinian president, and that Abbas needs this help really, really badly. Going back to the findings, we essentially found a significant relationship between the fortunes, ups and downs of Abbas and the fortunes, ups and downs of Israeli-Palestinian relations. And in particular, if there is one single issue that captures the ups and downs of the Israeli-Palestinian relations, it is the attitude regarding the two-state solution. What we currently find is that on the domestic front, Abbas's popularity is at one of the lowest ever. And again, remind you that this was before the resolution. And I would easily predict that Abbas's popularity has shot up for now. Until when, I don't know, but there is no doubt that he is safe for the time being. But his popularity has been declining for more than a year now. And we found about 2 weeks ago that 2/3 of the Palestinian public want him resigning. Only 1/3 of the public seem to be happy with the Palestinian leadership overall. This applies to Abbas as it applies to other Fatah leaders, with one single exception, and that is Marwan Barghouti. Barghouti remains the most popular Palestinian leader. He can defeat in elections, presidential elections, any other potential rival from within the Palestinian national camp, from within Fatah, or from Hamas. Okay. Yeah. let me try to organize my presentation by answering essentially three questions. How do Palestinians view Fatah, the backbone of the national project, state building, as well as peacemaking, and the most recent Congress of Fatah? And the second that I'll try to address is the domestic balance, internal balance within the Palestinian political system between Fatah and Hamas and other factions, and what is happening with that. And the third will be to look at the Israeli-Palestinian issues. I keep this at the end because the first two issues certainly have ramifications for this third. On the new leadership, the findings are a very, very serious blow to the new leadership. Only 1/3 of the Palestinian public expressed confidence that the new leadership will be able to deliver, to change the status quo. Not only that, but it's the same percentage essentially. 1 out of 3 Palestinians have confidence that this will unify Fatah. 2 out of 3 do not believe that it will unify Fatah. 2 out of 3 do not believe that it will help the goal of unifying the Palestinians, not just Fatah, but the West Bank and Gaza, and reconciling Fatah and Hamas. 2 out of 3 does not do not like the idea that Fatah has decided to select Abbas as the new leader for the next 5 years. 2 out of 3 do not believe that this Congress itself will help reform the PLO or hold the next meeting of the Palestinian National Council, the parliament of the PLO. So on this issue of Fatah leadership and the recent convention, it is very clear that the split is 2-1, 2 against everything that came out of it, and 1 in favor. To a large extent, Abbas therefore embodies, the current president embodies this split, that is the 2-1. And the findings indicate that there are 4 reasons why Abbas today is in such a difficult place. One is the question of relations with Israel. There is a very clear split. This time, actually, it is worse than 2-1. It is 3-4. A 3-4 split among the Palestinians on this question of of relations with Israel, that essentially believes 3 out of 4 that Abbas is not serious, that Abbas is not up to the challenge, that he is all talk but no action. Abbas's credibility, therefore, is seen positively by only a quarter of the Palestinians. So in terms of...
So it's not 3-4, it's 4-1.
Yeah, 3-1. Sorry, if I said 3-4...
3 of 4.
3 out of 4. So it means basically only a quarter of the Palestinians believe Abbas when he says, I will do 1, 2, 3. I will end our recognition of the state of Israel. 1 out of 4 will say, yeah, yes, you will do that. But 3 out of 4 will say, no, he's not going to do that. I will stop implementing the Oslo Agreement. Again, a quarter will say he is serious. 3/4 say he's not. Similarly with security coordination, I'll terminate security coordination. Again, only a quarter will say he is serious, and 3/4. So this is hurting him very, very much. His diminished credibility is influencing his popularity in a significant way. The second that we find, again, this is based on the current findings, is the question of his style of governance. There is a growing perception, this time close to 2-1. The 1/3 still giving him confidence on this. 2/3 do not. On all matters related to governance. So, can he suspend the immunity of members of the parliament? Again, 2-1 say, no, he can't. So he just did that. Before we did the survey, actually after. He did that after we did the survey. We've asked about this because he asked for a ruling from the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court is a recently appointed court, appointed by him. And he asked the court whether he can revoke, suspend the immunity of members of parliament. And the Constitutional Court said yes. Now, another court, a high court before that said no, you can't. So he established this new court, and this new court has said yes, you can do that. 2-1, the Palestinian public says no, you can't do that. So the public rejects the ruling of the Constitutional Court. Similarly, he did something else. Again, a few months ago, and we've asked about this in the current survey, he dismissed the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice is the head of the Supreme Judicial Council. We asked the public whether he can do that. And again, the public is essentially divided slightly more than 1-2. He gets a little bit more than that, 40-60 basically. Says no, he does not have the jurisdiction. He has no authority over the judiciary. This is a matter of the independence of the judiciary, and so the public believes his action is a violation of the constitutional rules.
But it is a violation? The question is not only the opinion of the public, but whether is that accurate to say that's a violation of the Constitution?
It depends on how you read the Constitution.
Yeah.
If you're asking me for my personal view, I would say...
No, I mean as a fact, is it a violation?
You know...
No, okay, I thought it was important to clarify now.
You know, a constitutional court looked at our basic law, which is our Constitution. The Constitution is so explicit about the immunity of the members of the parliament. The Constitution says only the parliament by 2/3 majority can suspend the immunity of the members of the parliament. Here comes a constitutional court that reads that and says, well, no, the president too can do that. Now, what is the fact? A constitutional court, senior judges, read the basic law that you and I can read, and if you and I read it, I would say, absolutely not. Yet a constitutional court said, yes, it can. So in answer to your second question, it depends where you stand. So if you're asking my opinion, I would say absolutely not. In fact, the basic law emphasizes so much the independence of the judiciary that it would be absolutely out of the question for anyone to even think that the president can dismiss the Chief Justice, which of course he did, and has just appointed a new Chief Justice. So the public again says no, he can't do that. What I'm giving you is an example of where issues of governance are hurting Abbas. He is acting in a manner that is highly unpopular. Most Palestinians support the separation of powers. Most Palestinians support independence of the judiciary. And they view Abbas as becoming more and more authoritarian. And this is definitely hurting him in our surveys. The third reason why he is losing support has to do with the split within Fatah. Although Dahlan, and this is about Dahlan essentially, and most of the recent decline in Abbas's popularity came from Gaza. And that essentially reflects Dahlan's popularity in Gaza. Dahlan does not, overall, if you look at Dahlan's standing within the Palestinian community, both West Bank and Gaza, he does not have much standing. He maybe get 3-4% support, not more than that. In Gaza, however, support could be up to 10% or more. And within the ranks of Fatah, it is about 50% in Gaza. So you can see he starts with very little among all Palestinians, particularly in the West Bank. Very few really know him or appreciate him. Most view him as a corrupt politician. In Gaza, the picture is different, and there are much greater level of support for him. Within Fatah in Gaza, he has almost 50% of Fatah supporters. So with the convention, Fatah's 7th convention, held before we did the survey, it was very clear that Abbas and Fatah have essentially removed Dahlan from the leadership, and that Dahlan does not have any chance of being reintegrated, as many in Fatah thought he would as a result of intervention from the Egyptians on this matter, and now they are very, very disappointed with that. And as a result, we see Abbas's popularity going down. I think essentially the reason the popularity went down is because they blame him for dismissing Dahlan altogether. There is one last issue that is not new, but it keeps hurting Abbas and his popularity, and this has to do with the perception that Abbas is deliberately blocking reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas. The perception that the reunification of the West Bank and Gaza is doable if only Abbas is to change his position. When we ask people who is to blame for the continuation, if we ask people who is to blame for the split between the West Bank and Gaza, they will point the finger at Hamas. But if we asked who is responsible for the continuation of the split today, why we currently have a reconciliation government but no reconciliation, no unification, less than 20%, out of 5 would say Hamas. The rest will either say Abbas or the reconciliation government. And so Abbas essentially is seen as blocking reconciliation, and since the issue of reconciliation is considered vital for the Palestinians, it is hurting all 4 issues we've asked about in the current survey, and it is very clear that he is suffering. The diminished popularity of Abbas is a result of that. Now, let me shift from that to the domestic balance. You haven't told me how much time I have, but I assume
you see by my body language.
I'll keep looking. Linked to this is the domestic balance of power. While Abbas is being hurt, something good happened in the West Bank that is benefiting Fatah. I know it's a contradiction in terms who is Abbas and who is Fatah. It's one of the same. Not exactly. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, Marwan Barghouti is considered, essentially in our survey, is the most popular leader. If elections are held today and Barghouti runs against the most popular Hamas figure, in this case would be Ismail Haniyeh, Barghouti wins 2-1. If it is Abbas running against the same Hamas candidate, Haniyeh wins. Haniyeh wins. Almost what we found, 50 to 45. 50 for Haniyeh, 45 for Abbas. It is very clear, therefore, that that people do distinguish between Abbas and other Fatah leaders, and by extension, with Fatah. Fatah's popularity in this survey has gone up by 4 percentage points to 41. It stood 3 months ago at 37. It has now gone up to 41. The entire change took place in the West Bank. So we look in the West Bank for why this has happened and looked at previous cases where popularity has gone down or gone up. And what we have found, the most telling development is the change in the perception of safety and security in the West Bank. There has been no change in Gaza with regard to the perception of safety and security, but in the West Bank there has been considerable improvement in the perception of safety and security. And it is very clear that people attribute this to things that Fatah had done. Fatah responsible for the security services, and that the security services are doing a good job enforcing order throughout the West Bank, or most of the West Bank where they have jurisdiction. And this seems to have helped Fatah. So despite the fact that people overall are very disappointed with the convention itself, the convention itself, no doubt, did not help Fatah. It's, as I said, it's 2-1 against what comes out of the convention. But the only thing that seems to have changed in the West Bank is this significant improvement, which helps Fatah.
What are the numbers for Hamas?
The same as it was 3 months ago,
Which is
32%. So
32?
32, yes. Now so we essentially have Hamas is about 1/3, slightly more in Gaza and slightly less in the West Bank. Fatah is doing much better now in the West Bank than in the Gaza Strip. This certainly brings Fatah, by the way, to where Fatah used to be about 2-3 years ago. For the last 2-3 years, Fatah's popularity has continuously gone down. 41% in this survey, by the way, is the exact same percentage Fatah received in the elections in 2006. So Fatah is more or less safe for the time being, even though it has very, very serious problems. Hamas is not benefiting from the problems that Fatah today has. Now, all of this affects Israeli-Palestinian relations. One reason, it's a mutual effect, essentially. You have credibility as a leader. This helps to promote the ideas, the two-state solution being one of them, of these ideas. If, on the other hand, the idea of a two-state solution is losing viability, then this is also going to hurt you as a leader who promotes this idea. And we clearly see this in this survey. 2/3 of the Palestinians today believe that the two-state solution is no longer viable. This is a major change. This is almost 10 percentage point change in just 3 months. A significant erosion in the viability of the two-state solution is what we currently find. We find very strong correlation between your view about viability of the two-state solution and your support for it. So support for the two-state solution has gone down. Today we do not have a majority support for the two-state solution. 2/3 say it's no longer viable. Only close to 44-45% say they support the two-state solution. What has gone up is support for the one-state solution. Support for the one-state solution has gone up from close to 32% to 36% in this current survey. So you have about 44% who support the two-state solution. We have about 36% who support the one-state solution. By the way, this is not, support for one or the other is not necessarily mutually exclusive. These are two separate questions. We ask about the two-state solution in a question that is separate from the question about the one-state solution.
What's that meaning for two peoples? not only a Palestinian state without Jews, but a binational state.
The one, oh yeah,
How do you define
very, very
one
good.
state?
You reminded me to define what we define what a one-state solution in the question. The question says a one-state solution whereby Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs would live in a single state with equal political and civil rights. This is the question, and today we have about 36% who say they support this idea. However, if you go back to the Palestinians and say, Abbas and Netanyahu have reached an agreement on a two-state solution, and here are the details of the two-state solution, would you support or oppose that? A lot of the one-staters will abandon the one state and accept the package of the two-state solution. That is why there is link between viability and support for the idea. Because the minute we remove the question about the viability, it is viable. Once we tell them that an agreement has been reached, it is then viable. Then we see a shift back to supporting the two-state solution. There's one
more thing.
All right, one last thing, which is worrying given the trend that we saw around the end of 2015. Around the end of 2015, starting September 2015, which is 1 month, if you recall, from October, when the stabbings and the violence erupted. Remember that. That was in October. In September, we found a significant rise in the level of support for violence. A majority, for the first time, supported resumption of violence during peacetime, meaning there was no war in Gaza. In 10 years. So in 10 years, we did not have a majority support for violence. From the day Abbas was elected president, support for violence dropped from 70 to 30. Single-handedly, Abbas changed public perception regarding violence immediately after he was elected president. And we did not see a majority support for violence until September of last year.
What was the percentage?
About 2/3.
In September.
Yes.
And what about now?
Now it has gone up to 53. Gone up, I say, because
53.
I'll give you the percentages since September. It started
September
last year.
250.
So September and December, we had about 2/3 of the Palestinians against 1/3 supporting violence. Then by March, we have gone down to 56% support for violence. By June, it has gone down to 54%. In September, last September, it has gone down to 48%. So it has been a steady decline. Since December, it has been steady decline. But now we see a spike. From, not a spike really, but an increase, significant increase. From 48 to 53. It's a 5 percentage point change. That's a significant change. And now, this is no doubt linked to other issues that we have asked about, including the question of the viability of the two-state solution, the perception about what Israel is doing with the so-called regularization bill and so on. There is no doubt that the public is responding to what it sees and as the Israeli government doing stuff that Abbas on the one hand is incapable of responding to, and the public is basically saying violence is the answer. Or not all of it, but a slice of the public is therefore shifting its views. Just to remind you what we started with, all of this was done before the vote. And I think because of the question of Israel and Palestine is central to Abbas's popularity, I have absolutely no doubt that his popularity has significantly improved, at least temporarily, as a result of the vote in the UN Security.
Thank you very much. Let's open up for Q&A. Yes.
I want to ask you, returning once to the judges, some of my Palestinian sources were saying that Abbas has gone to the practice of forcing judges of signing their letter of resignation before he appoints them. Is that something that you've also heard? Is that something that is based on more than just hearsay?
At this point, we only have evidence that he did that with the former Chief Justice.
So the one that stepped down?
Was dismissed. Yeah, he did not step down. He would say, he actually publicly issued a letter in which he said, I was dismissed. I did not resign. I did not step down. I was told that this letter that I was asked to sign was a formality, it doesn't mean anything, and so on. Of course.
And then he used that letter to dismiss him? Okay.
Hannah.
Okay. I would like to pose a question, Dr. Shikaki, beyond the issue of the poll. What's your evaluation as a Palestinian senior analyst of the real wishes of the Palestinian leadership? You know, for example, Houdiari, whom I bet you know very well, has been saying for a long time that in fact, the Palestinian Authority does not want a state that it thinks it will be just he used the term, I don't remember exactly how is it in Arabic, something like dawliya, something like it will be a tiny state, that in fact, in the international arena, they continue defending the idea of the need of a Palestinian state, but in fact, that's not what they want. What's your opinion on it?
Okay, so you're asking me to put aside
Data.
my data.
I'm sorry.
I have known Abbas personally, and I have known almost all the members of the Central Committee at one time or another. I can't think of a single one who would fit what my friend Houdiari have said. I have never seen a person more committed to peace than Abbas in my entire career in working with Palestinian leaders. There's absolutely no doubt that Abbas is the most dovish Palestinian leader among the leaders that we now have. And I have absolutely no doubt whatsoever that Abbas would jump on the opportunity to have a Palestinian state along the lines of what he and Olmert negotiated with the remaining 3 or 4 issues that he, Abbas, believes remained unresolved. In Abbas's views, his discussion with Olmert resolved 95% of the issues. He can clearly outline to you the 3 or 4 issues that are very specific, that remain open. And in my view, he would very easily, if they are resolved, he would very easily sign on an agreement with the State of Israel. So personally, putting aside my data, I have full confidence. If I want a Palestinian to sit at the table and negotiate a 2-state solution and reach one in months with someone who's like-minded, not with the current Prime Minister, I can't find a better person than Abbas, I must say. So I have absolutely all the confidence in the world that Abbas wants one, and that the Palestinian people want one, that Abbas will have the full support of his Central Committee for that, and that Palestinian public opinion will support the deal that Abbas reaches. The same Abbas that 2/3 of the public want him resign.
Yes,
if
please.
Today the environment in the Palestinian Authority is, to say the least, not democratic. Suppose one day it becomes democratic, what would be the questions you would like so much to ask to the people and in your polls?
Well, I have absolutely no doubt that the Palestinian public is democratic, but in the meanwhile, I also believe that most of the current Palestinian elite is not democratic. Most of the current elite around Abbas are not democratic. Their first nature is non-democratic. They are likely to do the easy thing rather than what is democratic. Abbas can become more democratic by allowing or ensuring that there is elections, periodic elections, allowing much greater tolerance of dissent within the Palestinian community and in the Palestinian press, allow factions other than Fatah and like-minded groups. Hamas the ability of Hamas as a political party. You can disagree with Hamas on its use of violence and in its views about how to organize Israeli-Palestinian relations, but as a political party that has a right to function within Palestinian society, that is certainly something that Hamas does not have today in the West Bank. Fatah does not have that in Gaza, so Hamas is even worse in terms of its democratic credentials. If we see, in every single survey, we ask Palestinians to assess the status of democracy. In many cases, we ask them to compare democracy within the PIA with that of other countries. Democracy in Palestine has consistently, during most of the last 20 years, been receiving the lowest evaluation of the Palestinian people. If you want to know which country receives
The worst.
the best, it is Israel.
Yes, please.
Professor, first question, quick in the interest of time here. Do you have breakdowns on your website and correlations of gender, age, education?
Yes, when that is when something emerges as an important issue, we do break it down.
Okay.
And so if you read the analysis, you will see us referring to that. For the most recent survey, you'll have to wait for another couple of days, maybe early next week, before you can find that.
Breakdown. The other question is, when last you presented here your data, your tone was, you were very, very concerned. You were concerned about the young people and
Yes.
their penchant for violence.
Absolutely.
You seem less concerned now. I don't know if that's because you're not addressing it, or are we looking at something substantively different? And also, are you familiar with the Israeli findings most recently put out in the Democracy Institute? We're also seeing a severe lack of trust and belief in Israeli institutions.
Thank you.
I see the reports that are issued by IDI, and I'm not surprised. I think we see significant erosion in public trust of the institutions on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. I have not mentioned the youth, but the findings that I've mentioned earlier remain the same. The also generation, the 18 to 22, are certainly the most alienated from the domestic political process, the most supportive of violence, and the most rejecting of the two-state solution. These three major findings that we found more than a year ago. And in fact, going back to September, when we saw the rise in violence, that was also a time that was coincidental with this emerging of a huge gap between the 50 and above, the leaders basically, the 50 and above, and the 18 to 22. This gap has not narrowed a bit since we found it 15 months ago.
Just to mention that the survey is on your website, right?
Yes, all of
you
them
can, yes, please.
Professor, what support is there for the Palestinian leadership to take Israel to The Hague in the wake of the resolution in the UN? And from your ties in the Palestinian Authority, do you know if they're going to do it, and if so, when?
I doubt very much that it will be soon, but if I asked the public, actually we didn't ask specifically for this in the current survey. We've asked in general about joining international organizations. The percentage is very high. If I frame the question in the way you have just presented it, I would say close to 80% will say do it. So there is tremendous support for fighting Israel in all kinds of international arenas.
Daniel.
Do you try to factor in economic factors into the attitudes and so forth? Like, would it be possible to postulate that the high rate of unemployment among the youth is causing radicalization as it does in other countries?
There is absolutely no doubt about that, although it's not directly related to unemployment. The 18 to 22 are mostly students who are not yet in the market. But there is no doubt that their perception of their future is extremely important. The 18 to 22 seem to be the most pessimistic about the future, about their own personal future, but also about the future of the Palestinian people. And so there is no doubt that this perception about the economy and about their own role in that economy is something that weighs heavily on this generational split that I mentioned.
Yes, please.
Have you seen any repercussions of Trump's victory on the Palestinian public opinion, and what would you assess to be the repercussions if he makes good on his promises to transfer the embassy to Jerusalem?
We have asked in this survey, I haven't mentioned the details because there's nothing spectacular about the findings. From the previous surveys, we've been asking about Trump and Clinton for a while. Most Palestinians, more than 70%, believe that there is absolutely no difference between the two. The 30% were divided between Clinton, basically 2-1 in favor of Clinton. We've asked in the current survey, we asked Palestinians to assess the era of Obama and we asked them whether they want Trump to play a role in the peace process. The overwhelming majority of the public assessed Obama's legacy very, very negatively with regard to the peace process. They said that he did not do much to promote the peace process. Again, this was before the US abstention. On the Trump question, we found a majority, but a slim majority, that wants him to stay out of the peace process. We have not asked specifically whether he will move the embassy to Jerusalem. If he does, in my view, only bad things are likely to happen in terms of public reaction. We could say from the second Intifada to what happened September 15, the rise in support for violence in September 15 that continued with us for a while and we continue to suffer from now, started with concerns about changing the status quo in Jerusalem. And so I think Jerusalem is a very, very sensitive spot for the Palestinian public. A move of the embassy, I think, would basically provide a spark that could very well be very, very serious.
Jonathan.
Jonathan Furter from Bloomberg. The only guy who kind of consistently shows up in the second tier of this poll is Mahmoud Abbas. He kind of hangs in there at about 5%. So that and a related question. One, I'm interested in how much of a future factor you see him. Does he have any chance of joining later leadership? And two, Netanyahu keeps on talking about the age of Aquarius with Saudi Arabia steering the process. Do you see that as happening because of his the lure of Israeli technology, or do you think this is sort of a straw man?
Thank you. I think Dahlan has a future in Gaza. I don't see Dahlan having a future in the West Bank.
And the refugee camps in Lebanon and
He might elsewhere. Elsewhere it depends on the extent of investment he puts in these places. In Gaza, however, he is genuinely popular, particularly among the youth within Fatah. So if he decides to establish a new political party, my guess, that party will have some support in Gaza, but very little in the West Bank.
so much so that he might actually be able to take over Gaza,
No.
With Egyptian, no.
Absolutely out of the question. There is no way that he can stand up to Hamas. Hamas has solid military control over Gaza. No one in his right mind would consider going to war against Hamas unless this is a life or death situation. So Abbas would never think about that. The Egyptians would be crazy to even think about this for a second. The only way he can win support is if Hamas' popularity goes down, which is not the case today, at least not today. And if he decides, that he has the ability, if the financial and other ability to win hearts and minds. Winning hearts and minds in Gaza is not very difficult under the circumstances. But the idea that he can control Gaza just simply fiction. Netanyahu and the Saudis, I think Netanyahu is deluding himself, to be honest. There are certain things that the Saudis and other Gulf countries might be open to doing, given that they have common enemy. But the idea that the Saudis would publicly do anything with Israel without Israel first moving on the Palestinian front is again fiction, the same way. So there has to be a very serious change in the way Israel addresses the two-state solution and negotiations with Abbas before I can think of anything that the Saudis would publicly do or would significantly cement any kind of relationship or alliance between the Saudis and the Israelis.
Let me ask you a question. I'm borrowing from George here. Did you ever ask Palestinians about their opinion of, in the case of two-state solution, Jewish or Israeli settlers can stay at the Palestinian state?
We did. During the last 20 years or so, we've asked a few times about this issue. When the peace process looked promising, we had significant level of support, but not a majority, a significant minority in favor of that. Today, there isn't much support for the idea that settlers can stay. This is not about Israelis or Israeli Jews wanting to live in the Palestinian state. This is about the current settlers staying where they are. There's very, very strong opposition to them. There was at one point we did surveys among settlers and neighboring villages and towns. So we went to a big settlement like Ariel, for example. We asked residents of Ariel whether they want to live with their neighbors in a Palestinian state. And we went to Salfit and neighboring towns and we asked them, if the Israelis say, yes, we want to stay, would you be willing to allow them? This was during a period of positive peacemaking efforts, and most of the villagers actually said yes. If the settlers want to stay under Palestinian sovereignty in a Palestinian state, they are welcome. Today we do not find that kind of support.
Yes, please.
In your the publication of your report, you said that poverty is one of the issues that most seriously concerns Palestinians, even before the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Yes.
Can you elaborate a little bit on how the economic status of the West Bank has changed in the last year, how it affects the generation of the ones that are now heads of families, and how that affects their view of the politics? And if you could elaborate on the 3-4 issues that you said that Abbas needed still agreement with all
On the economic situation, since 2013, economic conditions have essentially been deteriorating. A lot of this is linked to the amount of international support to the Palestinian Authority, which had affected the rest of the economy. And so the level of growth has been struggling to match the level of the birth rate and other things. And the level of unemployment has been on the rise. So per capita income is essentially has been going down as a result, and there's no doubt that these issues have therefore become of an immediate concern to the public. And as part of our regular assessment of how people see the major problems of the day, it is absolutely what you just said. In our most recent survey, poverty and unemployment is now considered to be the most serious problem confronting Palestinians. About a third of the Palestinians selected it as occupation and settlement scheme number two. Usually occupation and settlements come number one, unless there is something important, something else important at that time, and so this is one of those periods. There was a question about the three issues. You're asking me to remember. One had to do with the percentage of territory to be exchanged. Olmert was talking about 7%, slightly less. Abbas was talking about 3%. The second had to do with the refugees, number of refugees. Abbas was thinking in terms of 100,000 refugees returning as part of family unification. Olmert was thinking about 15,000. The third had to do with the definition of what is the Holy Basin. Abbas was thinking Holy Basin should apply only to the old city. Olmert was thinking that the Holy Basin should also include the Ma'rib Olive and Silwan, and so that this question was murky. That's my recollection. There might have been a fourth.
Small things, the small things.
Given all the other issues that they agreed on.
But these are the stumbling blocks.
A small specific thing. Last time you mentioned females, women, and you actually said women tend to de-radicalize and that they get married,
at a certain age. Right.
And sorry, but shortly after that began the female stabbings. What changed? What do you have to say about the female increase in violence? It seemed from our perspective.
Female stabbings, these are kids who are doing the stabbing, and what we find is that the younger you are, the more radical you are. Although our surveys ask 18 and above, my own guess is that if we ask 15 and above, we would find things even worse with the 15 and above. What I've said last time, remains true today, is that this generation gap seemed to begin to shift narrow with age. That is, if you are young, you are open to radicalization much easily than if you are 5 years older than that age. Women, because they marry early, and part of that, of course, is the question of responsibility and agency. You see yourself responsible, it is your job to do X, Y, Z. This seems to affect your priorities, and therefore radicalization becomes more difficult for you to be open to radicalization. Women, because they marry earlier than men by about 5 years on average, women tend therefore to de-radicalize sooner than men. We find that men basically take another 5 years before they radicalize. And so women remain, as I said last time, much more easily de-radicalized with age than men.
Yes, please. We're wrapping up.
Do you feel that the people, especially in Gaza, are telling you the truth when they're opposing Hamas? And if you have doubts, what steps do you take to ensure that your picture is accurate?
We find that people in the West Bank and people in Gaza tend to have concerns about us asking questions. We ask two types of questions. There are questions that ask you to tell us what your opinion is, and questions that ask you to tell us how you would behave under certain conditions. We find that there is a significant difference between the way you respond to these two types of questions. How do we know that? Well, we find that when we go to Gaza and ask them questions about how they voted in the last elections, they were voting age, you were voting age, now we're asking you how you voted. We find that there are more people in Gaza now who tell us they voted for Hamas than the facts were. In the West Bank, there are more people who tell us they voted for Fatah more than the facts were. So how do we deal with that? Well, we basically reweigh the data. so that those who told us that they voted for Hamas would now, in our data file, would be the exact same percentage who voted for Hamas in Gaza and who voted for Fatah in Gaza, the same in the West Bank. So we have now reweighted the data. So we now look at the findings, how the rest of the findings changed. What we find is the following. On attitudes, change is almost nothing. 1%, maybe 2% at best. So in terms of attitudes, people, including those who lied to us about how they voted, still were honest with us in terms of their attitudes. However, on the question of how they will behave if new elections, so this is about electoral behavior, that one changes dramatically when we reweigh the data. So people who lie about how they voted in the last elections lie about how they will vote in the next elections. And the only way we can get to the truth of how they will vote in the next elections is by reweighting the data.
Is by?
By reweighting the data.
You know, in Israel, there's an explanation why the pollster always get it wrong, because people tell the truth in the exit polls and lie in the ballot. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Shikaki. Wonderful, as always, and thanks for coming, and looking forward to hosting you next. Thanks for coming.